Okay, thank you for coming to the Xanadu Review. My name is Prester John's Revenge, but you can call me PJ. Today with me, I have Nat of the Bitch Sensei Substack. Nat, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, the kind of writing you do, just kind of a brief little rundown on you, and then we'll jump into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like PJ said, I write under the name Bitch Sensei on Substack. I've been writing on there since about 2020, but around 2023 or so, I rebranded to a book club. So instead of writing, the personal essays, I've kind of transitioned into writing about books a little bit more. I feel like it kind of expands the world of topics I'm able to address. Um, but I've been playing around with the forum for the last few years. I just finished up my first fiction series. We did Gothtober, which was really fun. We're
That was
wrapping
great.
that up. Thank you. Yeah, we have one more post coming. It's going to drop on Halloween. Hannah of Haunting the Staircase and I are working on one last blowout short story, and it's making out to be pretty vile. So I'm very excited about that.
Ooh, I'm definitely looking forward to that one too. I really enjoy Hannah's work as well.
Yeah, she's really great. And she's one who Hannah and I have been connected since the very beginning, right? One of my very early on Substack friends. So it's been really cool to watch each other's work grow and to finally work on some things together. I feel like Substack is a really great way to connect with people and find ways to collaborate like we are now.
Yeah, absolutely. That actually kind of
Mhm.
leads us really well into the first topic that I wanted to bring up with you because I was actually just talking to a good friend of mine yesterday who's also on Substack, Chesterton's friend. So shout out to him about how there's just so much great writing and art and just really interesting, unique, and creative things that you see. But at the same time, it feels like in mainstream culture, we're just kind of stuck and kind of something I posted about recently. It feels like almost since maybe 2015, 2016 or so, that's when it's felt really pronounced that culture has just kind of been stuck on one note. We're seeing the same pop stars, the same movies, and it feels like we've just kind of hit a stopping point. We're kind of at the top of a roller coaster, so to speak, and it feels like we're at the cusp of a major change. But so, how do you feel about that? Because at least to me, there's this weird bifurcation and contrast of there's all this really interesting stuff just bubbling underneath the surface, but mainstream culture has just gotten so kind of one note and stuck. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I totally agree. And I think that it's true and it's not true, right? Because we do have the mainstream that's, recycling the same couple themes and plots over and over. Like, hey, let's make Alien again. Hey, let's make American Psycho again, even though it was released 20 years ago and still holds up beautifully. Like, there are all these things that are being like churned out instead of bringing forth new ideas. But I do think that's only really in the mainstream. Because I think if you look closer and a little bit more locally, you can find new things, right? Because, for example, I go to this local theater in the city, right? And so they do all kinds of screenings of older art films, which is great, but then they also have the local ones, right? And so they have these, like I saw a preview recently for this super low budget, just schlocky looking goth film being released in 2024. And I didn't see it because it looks kind of bad, but people are making unique things. I just think that they don't have the access to the bloated media sphere, right? Because the big media companies want to bet on something that is safe. So they're churning out all of the familiar things. We're getting another Marvel movie, we're getting another reboot, because it's kind of low hanging fruit and it gets butts and seats. But if you go somewhere besides AMC, you might be able to, you just have to work for it. And people don't want to work for it, which is fair, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too that you say that it gets the butts in the seats. The two things that made me think of is A, it feels like we've maybe come to the end of the purchasing power of that, because I don't know if you follow this type of thing, but there's been, at least in the last 2 years, a lot of very big, high profile flops in like the Marvel, Star
Hmm.
Wars worlds. And I see there's so much dialogue and conversation of it's like, oh, they made it quote unquote woke, whatever. But really, I think the problem is like, why the fuck are we still making Star Wars movies in 2024? Is there
Hello.
really anything left to say? And I'm somebody like, I've kind of
Hmm.
checked out of that stuff, more or less just for that reason. Like, there's not really anything left to say on any of these topics. It's not really interesting or
Hmm.
creative anymore. Um, and I don't know, the one that really makes me think of it, I haven't seen it yet, but I guess there's a new Marvel show. It's Agatha All Along, I think. And the people say, oh, they're talking about how it's like, the gayest Marvel show of all time, which, there's a certain portion of the population that's gonna, bigoted and doesn't like that based on that fact. And there's a certain
Hmm.
portion of the population that's gonna like it because of that. But for the most part, like it sounds like it's an interesting concept, but that's something maybe that would have been like a niche internet series that would have been really cool. But when
Hmm.
you try to force an interesting concept onto these big name properties, it's going to kind of not really please anybody, because realistically, like there's and I know we'll probably get into this definitely in a little bit, like there's definitely an audience who could do something who wants that kind of thing and it's creative and interesting. Say you're John Waters or whatever.
Hmm.
But if you try, let's also, it also has to be Marvel, because it makes me think of the first Joker was a really good movie, at least to me, because it
Oh yeah.
was a good story. Like you could have done that without having anything to do with the Joker. But
Mhm.
you have all these, this endless Marvelization, or I guess in that case, DC.
Right, right. Well, and it's frustrating too, right? Because you can't help but wonder, kind of like you were saying, how different it would be if it were being made more independently of these huge channels. Because I've been hearing a lot of buzz around the Penguin, right? And I'm
Hmm.
like, does everything need an expanded multiverse? Can you give me a new villain? Like, I don't really, you know, and I don't really have strong feelings about the whole like, oh, let's, if we want to call it wokeifying something. I'm like, okay, like, sure, I guess, but we could also create new characters that have like an interesting story that is connected to their race instead of being like, oh, we'll just like swap it and then it'll be good and it'll make everyone happy. And it's
Yeah,
like,
it feels like,
well, give me another Blade. Don't give me like, I don't
yeah,
care about Black Spider-Man. Give me a different kind of Blade. You know what I mean?
or something completely new. Well, also because in
Yeah.
those cases, it, like I said, there's a small portion of the audience who, at least to me, like they will, depending on like the identity markers, they'll just get pissed off and hate it no matter what. There's a
Right.
small portion of the people who like they don't care about the quality, they just like that there's more inclusivity. But I think the vast, like I would say like 95% of the audience, they just want something that's entertaining, that speaks to them, has some sort of
Hmm.
artistic merit. And I think really, for to use the term the wokeification, it's just a very lazy way that Hollywood is always like, oh well, this is
Hmm.
something that people want. Maybe shield us from criticism for something that's arguably not up to par, kind of lazy. Or at least in my
Hmm.
opinion, I think one of the main things is you get people in Hollywood. I think there actually is still people who are creative and want to do interesting things, but all that gets made is, big budget sci-fi, fantasy, what have you. And in a lot
Hmm.
of cases, it doesn't please the original fans because it's, you know, the whole culture war angle aside, you've changed it so significantly that it's not really, it's not true to the source material on like a storytelling level, and
Hmm.
you're also not getting new fans. So um
Well, and it's shallow and cheap. Is it? Yeah, just make a new story.
yeah, I don't know if like the one example that comes to mind is Amazon did a series of the Wheel of Time books. I don't know if you're a fantasy person. Like that was one of my favorite series of all time, and they did a lot of interesting stuff. And interestingly enough, it was already like it had some, I guess you could even call it feminist themes, because like the one of the main pitches of the books is like it's a world, it's kind of post-apocalyptic in a way, And I don't want to get into the specifics, but in this world, like pretty much only women can use magic. And if men do, like it drives them insane. And it's really interesting and says some really interesting things about gender dynamics. And it's does some really interesting nuanced things, but they just try to like, oh, well, what if we made it Game of Thrones? And they took everything that was interesting about it. They made it dark, and it, like the series itself, it's more like Renaissance era, but they made it dark and medieval and like very lazy girl boss. And it's it kind of pleased nobody. And I don't want to get too off into that tangent. It was almost too bad because they had Rosamund Pike from Gone Girl and a lot of other great stuff, who was one of the leads and my favorite characters, and they wasted a really good cast. But so not, I guess, yeah, but that kind of reminds me of one of the pieces that you wrote that I really enjoyed. And you could tell me the specific title so people can check it out. Is about John Waters and the concept of good taste versus bad taste. And at least to me, like, I guess I have a populist streak in entertainment, I guess you could say, just because I love weird, quirky, creative stuff like John Waters, or like even The Room. I think it's bad, but it's creative and it's passionate. And I think that's something that's really enjoyable. But we have this weird time and culture right now where you want to have everything be big budget, but also be artistic and try to be everything to all people. And you kind of don't even see like the passionate, even if it's bad, but it's, passionately made now. So I guess first of all, like, what was the name of that piece so people can check it out, and kind of what are your thoughts on that concept of like the high versus low?
Yeah, so that was called Dreamlanders in Defense of Bad Taste. And so something I love about John Waters is very similar to what you said, right? I love something that has heart. I love a scrappy underdog. And with the current paradigm, you don't really get to see the scrappy underdog, right? You have to go seek it out. But then you have people like John Waters from like the 60s and 70s who he's in the Criterion Collection. Like, this man managed to make movies that have singing assholes, literally singing assholes in them. That is in the Criterion Collection next to The Boy in the Striped Pajamas or whatever. And there's something so rebellious about that to me. And like, you can argue the merit of movies like that, but I just think it's downright fun. I think his sense of humor is great. The acting isn't always great, and it doesn't have to be, because it's just buddies. It's just friends having fun, making a movie, being weird. And I don't know. I think we're kind of due for a resurgence in that, and you can kind of see it everywhere, right? Whenever you talk to people, they're kind of sick of what's going on in the media landscape right now. And, there are a few films that'll pop up that I think are kind of leaning towards that subversion, but are still like, a little higher budget and a little squeaky clean, which, has its pros and cons. But I don't know. I think now too, people kind of have media consumption kind of as like a personal signifier, right? So it's like, oh, if I can attach myself to this thing, then that says something about me. And if I can attach myself to this subversive thing, then that makes me interesting. And I don't know, I think it just kind of complicates the way that people are able to enjoy things. I don't know if that made any sense.
No, absolutely. But, it kind of reminds me of kind of in the music world, because I know you're a musician as well. I remember for a long time when I was coming up and really starting to get into indie music and stuff, sometimes it feels it's less about the quality of the music itself, and like you said, your taste in music, it says something about you as a person and your intellectual prowess, your social sensibilities, whatever you want to say. And I'd always remember people like cite like, oh, I love Neutral Milk Hotel, that's my favorite band of all time, and Airplane Over the Sea. It's like, is that really your favorite band of all time, or did you just read on Pitchfork that if you're I love the the outsider art aspect of it, and like you would have topics, conversations with people, and sometimes you could pretty much, if it's a certain type of person, I found you can guess with like 70% accuracy, like what their top 10 movies or bands are just based on, go to IMDb and whatever the top are or whatever, Pitchfork said is the right thing.
Mhm.
But, and it's
They
this
said, I
weird,
watch Anthony Fantano. I know what albums are
uh
good.
yeah. Yeah. And Anthony Fantano was like, he's an interesting case to me because I remember like
Mhm.
I was listening to his reviews way back in the day, when he first started. He was kind of like an edgy like 4chan shit poster guy. And then I don't know if you
Mhm.
remember, there was this article that Fader published on him, kind of like calling him out, and then he just turned on a dime and like he's like, oh, now he had like this like Sam Hyde-esque like shit posty meme channel that he deleted that, and he just kind of completely changed his whole vibe and aura. And it's kind of weird to
No
see.
kidding.
But
What a pivot.
yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know. I at least for me personally, like I sometimes I like watching or listening to review stuff if it's somebody who's interesting and has something interesting to say. But
Mhm.
I don't know, I haven't watched Anthony Fantano in a while just because it feels like it's more about what is like, the quote unquote right thing to think versus what he actually likes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, shoot, I think back to being a kid, growing up in the suburbs, right? I was kind of a lonely kid, and so music was very much my like, how do I shape my identity? Oh, let me find the coolest music and like just listen to it. Like I would play my guitar by myself and that's it. But I'm like, oh, let me listen to this music. And if I can just, oh, once I get into prog metal, I'll reach transcendence because I'm listening
Hmm.
to the most cool and obscure music ever, you know? And it's just, I don't know, it's kind of insincere and there's like no need to perform your taste for people. And I don't know, I think to kind of circle back to the high and low taste thing, I feel as though you have like the tastemaker class, right? And they're kind of in a place of, well, I just want to be an everyman. And so you have like super famous people talking about reality TV and like lowest common denominator movies because they just want to be like, oh, I'm just like you. It's like I don't care
Yeah,
what Kim Kardashian is watching. I don't think
it's
she talks about what she's watching, but my
yeah.
point stands.
Funny enough, like I feel like she's kind of exited the public conversation, but for a
Yeah.
while it was like I've I've never actually heard Kim Kardashian speak, so I don't really have an opinion on her. But she and like was shorthand for like dumb, low taste, kind of like like Nickelback or something like
Yeah.
that. But it's really again like maybe around that time with like the whole socially conscious conversation. Like it went from Kim Kardashian, that's so dumb, to like, oh, actually, Kim Kardashian is really smart and cool, and you're
Hmm.
sexist if you don't like her. And
It's
it's like, is there
branding, baby.
yeah, is there anything in the middle, or just to, like be
Hmm.
honest? Because at least to me, I remember, well, like with Pitchfork specifically, I remember a decade ago, if you looked at like their top albums of the year, it was all
Hmm.
indie bands from Portland that nobody had ever heard of, and that's how you show that you're a smart person, a good person. And
Right.
now it's like Beyonce and I don't know whoever
Hmm.
whatever's top 40 now, because you don't want to be seen to be an elitist, but like the fact that you love, Taylor Swift or whatever shows how unproblematic and, like you said, the every
Hmm.
man, every woman, what have you. So it's really and again, like Anthony Fantano is somebody who really shows that kind of weird bifurcation that happened to me.
Yeah, well, and like the not wanting to be elitist thing is really interesting and it feels kind of new to me, right? Like I'm a little younger, so like maybe it's not, but it's like, okay, so I'm relatable because I listen to this thing and I'm like, it Taylor Swift isn't that good though. Like it's okay to criticize things. It's okay to
Yeah.
be kind of a snob if you want to be. And like I
I
said, I
like what you
don't
like.
consider myself a snob. Like what you like, exactly. I grew up on Nickelback. We were just talking about
Mhm.
butt rock, and like I will defend butt rock.
Yeah.
I just sang Creed at karaoke a couple months ago. I initiated a butt rock theme that night because it's
Beautiful.
fun as hell.
So what would
and
be
I
so I didn't mean to interrupt. What
no,
would
go
be
ahead.
like if talking about butt rock? Because actually, like it's not my favorite band ever, but like to me, I loved Creed when I was like a young teen. Like to
Oh
me, because I
yeah.
grew up very religious. Like I don't think
Hmm.
Creed was technically a Christian rock band, but I used to
Oh, they
love
were.
Creed.
They're
They
very
weren't.
Christian.
I
Can
think they
you
are
take
Christian.
me high? Come on, they're talking
Who
about God.
will play the well round?
Go,
But
it's
no,
golden streets. He's talking about heaven.
yeah. Well, point being, like, I think I don't know if they like branded themselves as Christian rock, or
Right.
point
It was
being, like,
maybe subtle.
it was as heavy as you could be while still being a Christian. So I just have a soft spot in my heart for them. Also, like, genuinely good songwriting from like a pop structure
Yeah.
point of view. Their guitar player is great. But to that end, like, what would you say, like, your for the low taste, like, what's your favorite high taste artist versus low taste? Like, what would you say?
Ooh. Are we talking music?
Music, movies, like,
Music.
really
Okay.
anything.
Let's see. So, I'm like, God, what even qualifies as high taste when it comes to music? Because my brain just went, oh, Death Grips. I'm like, Death Grips isn't
Mhm.
high taste,
Yeah.
but it's inaccessible in a way. So I guess that's maybe in certain spheres, perhaps. Um, I don't know. I listen to my taste has changed a lot in the last couple of years, particularly with music. Um, uh, but I listen to a lot of like 70s funk for the most part. So I'm listening to like
Oh yeah.
Sly and the Family Stone like most days. That's just kind of
Mhm.
like what I put on. So I'll count that as my high taste. Like, oh, it's from the
Mhm.
70s. Not everyone listens to it. And then low taste, I love pop music. All right. Like I love early 2000s Britney. I think Chapel Roan is great and fun. Though I think she's kind of like an interesting intersection of that idea, actually, because she always does the like, if she's nodded to John Waters a couple of times, she's always engaging kind of with that sphere, but has the most very catchy and engaging pop music.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that first Billie Eilish album was really good. I haven't listened to anything since, but I love something that's catchy that I can bob my head to, and
Yeah.
it just you know.
No, I keep on. What would you say? Like, what's the? Is it Chapel? Because I've been saying Chappelle Roan. I've
Hmm.
only ever heard it. I've
I
only
think
ever
it's
read it.
Chapel. I'm
Okay.
not positive.
Well, what's the song for me to check out? Because I feel like I've turned into, like, that proverbial 30-year-old boomer, just because, like, I've kind of, like you. I kind of just, like, stopped engaging with new culture in like 2012.
Yeah,
Not because, like, oh, I hate the mains. I just, I'm 33 now. It's hard to keep up with, but
yeah.
I do want to try to new things. So what was the song or album to check out by her?
Well, yeah, that's common, I think. We're like, as you get older, shoot, I'm only 27, but I'm already kind of seeing myself fall into that. And I'd really like to, I have a goal to engage with music a little more mindfully. Cause like I said, I'm like reaching whenever you ask me what music I listen to. I'm like, I put on the same Sly album every day. But as far as Chapel Roan goes, try out Red Wine Supernova. It like
Hmm.
and her music is fun. It is very feminine. So if that isn't like your thing, you might not love it. But I think as far as pop music goes, it's
Oh,
cool. She has a good voice. She's doing something interesting. I love seeing her yell at paps. I think that's funny and awesome. It
Taps.
sparks the most, yeah, like paparazzi people.
Oh, okay. No, that's.
Yeah,
I'll
and
give it a chance. I wonder if
yeah,
that's a nod to Oasis's Champagne Supernova.
maybe. Isn't Oasis back?
I think so. I've never only ever been like a casual Oasis guy.
Hmm.
But no, that's not a deal breaker to me, because at least for me, like, I've kind of the same. I stopped in like the early 2000s, but I love
Hmm.
to early 2010s, like a lot of, like, more female oriented pop music. Like, one of my
Hmm.
favorite bands of all time is the Cardigans, which most people know for the song
Yeah.
Love Fool. They do a lot of great stuff. There's so much great stuff from, I mean, people. It makes me think of, again, we're at an interesting time in culture to bring that back, where I was walking
Hmm.
my dogs the other day and I saw these like 12, 13-year-old boys. They're, playing some kind of sport or whatever, and they had their speakers playing, and they were playing some Katy Perry songs, which on one level,
No
like, it
kidding.
was when I was that age, like, I don't listen to girl music other
Of
than, like,
course, right.
Evanescence. I absolutely did, but it was like,
Yes,
heavy
but
girl
that's
music.
different. And she also has a
Yeah,
guy yelling, so it makes it
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, but on one level, it's like, oh, that's cool to see people aren't as in
Mhm.
their musical ghettos as much. But at the same time, they were listening to California Girls, which was big when I was in high school, so it was very interesting.
Right.
Um, but
I feel
and
like that's
one,
kind of cyclical, right? Because you have like, I feel like with every age group, they're really going to gravitate towards the things that came like 10 to 20 years before them, where it's
mhm,
like not quite the stuff that their parents listened to, but it's old enough to be, oh, well, I'm a little bit obscure. I'm listening to something slightly older, you know?
mhm.
Like for me, it was that early 2000s pop music because, I was, like I said, I'm 27. So for me, it was like I was a toddler when that stuff was coming out. But then I circle back
Mhm.
and I'm like, actually, this is great. And I'm
Yeah,
obscure because I'm listening to 2000s Britney,
I'm not like the
which is
other girls.
hilarious
I
in
listen to
hindsight. But
2000s Britney. Yeah,
yeah, right. Well, and
but it.
whenever I was a teenager, I was always hanging out with all of like the metalcore guys, right? So I start
Mhm.
performing my taste to cater to that. But then I get into their car and then they play Ellie Goulding, and I'm like, oh, I'm allowed to do that, aren't I? Because
Yeah,
as a
it's
teenager, everything I do is performing for the male because that's just how I was. But
yeah. Well, it's
it's
a
nice to have
teenager in
permission.
general, right? Like,
Absolutely.
you perform for like the opposite gender as well. You're like, oh, I'm
Hmm.
tough, but also I have a sensitive side, right? So that's a
Exactly.
so
Exactly. I
girls, I
contain
like.
multitudes.
Mhm. I'm pretty diverse in my music tastes. I listen to Marilyn Manson and Evanescence, but that shit,
Wow.
that's the thing too. Like that, it was all very poppy too. Like I remember when I was a
Hmm.
kid, like, oh, I don't listen to like, stupid pop music like Coldplay and Beyonce. I listen to real music like Marilyn Manson and Evanescence. But that stuff was so poppy. Like Beautiful People is a very, very poppy song, and
Oh
like
yeah.
all of that like new metal, all that stuff of that era, which is why I think, and again, like from what I've seen, like Gen Z, a lot of these kids are getting into like the Deftones and Marilyn Manson, and it has very good pop
Hmm.
sensibilities
Yeah, it's
despite
pop
all
music
the.
in a black trench coat with a chain wallet.
Yeah.
Like that's all it is.
Oh
And I
yeah.
love that. Like I said, I love pop music. I love a catchy song structure. I'm here for it. And I love to see the new metal revival as well because
Hmm.
I I don't know. I think there's a lot you can do with that genre that maybe hasn't been done yet or can at least be done in a
Yeah.
new way now that we have so much access to all of the, anyone can get Ableton and anyone can make music on their phone. So it can add an interesting dynamic, I think.
Yeah, apparently even like some rappers are like, citing Deftones and new metal
Oh
because it was
yeah.
always, hip hop
Hmm.
adjacent. So it's really interesting to see. And again, like, back to the original question, like you see on some levels, it feels like everything has just become homogenized because I don't know, people have very strong opinions on Taylor Swift, which to
Hmm.
me, like, it seems kind of strange. I almost don't want to say anything negative about her because the Swifties are crazy, but Taylor Swift feels like the pop star that would have existed in um, the Starship Troopers universe because it's like just the
Mm-hmm.
most like everything from like 1960 to present pop music blended up and just filtered through a Swedish producer. Um, but no, it's kind of cool to see. But to slightly switch gears a little bit, this is something else we've talked about, um, and just kind of it made me think of a little bit too because we're talking about like the performative nature of taste in music, and I feel like a lot of it is kind of based upon and performing for like those middle class sensibilities of your
Hmm.
curated taste and identity, and kind of the concept of psychology as a practice versus therapy culture, and it's something that we've talked
Mm.
about a little bit, kind of on Substack, and I guess I was wondering what your thoughts were on that because on one level I think it's really good that we're seeing people becoming more open to talking about mental health, but at the same
Hmm.
time, sometimes it feels like some of the issues that we're seeing with the how do I want to put it, like the medicalization of normal human emotions, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. So I guess what are your thoughts on that? Because I think to kick it off, the quote that I've said before is it feels like it's this weird bifurcation between like I ain't going to therapy, that's gay, and like going to
Hmm.
therapy for every little thing and not being able to just say, hey, these are just my emotions, that's fine, it doesn't need to be medicalized.
Yeah, and like it, I don't know. I'm probably just going to regurgitate a lot of what you just said because I generally agree, right? Where I don't think we necessarily need to pathologize everything, and just because we have a name for something, it doesn't mean it's like diagnosable or necessary to be diagnosed, right? And it's such a case by case thing that it's hard for me to feel like I can make any sweeping statement on it, right? But for me, like if someone says everyone should go to therapy, I'm like, I don't want to go to therapy. I'm too manipulative to be in therapy. The one time I tried, I was like, I'm intentionally leaving out all these details so that this random person won't judge me.
Hmm.
And I and for me, I'm closer to neurotypical, so I'm sure it's different for other people, but it's like I'd rather just talk to some of my friends or family who know my whole lore and kind of know how I operate anyway. Like, you mean I have to hire someone and give them my whole entire traumatic backstory? I'm not interested in doing that. And so to kind of make sweeping points about how, like, in order to be well adjusted, you have to pay a therapist to listen to you talk about your problems. I will not be doing that. I don't think my medical insurance will cover that, for one. For two, I hate appointments. I will not be making them. I don't see the regular doctor. I don't need to see the brain doctor too.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. I think that just having access to all of the terminology maybe makes people take things a little bit too seriously. Like yeah, of course you're sad. Of course you're anxious. It's okay. You don't need, I'm not going to say you don't need medication. Some people
Hmm.
need medication.
Some people definitely
But
do.
yeah, but I don't know. That isn't something that I would really want to make sweeping statements about because I know everyone is different. But at the same time, I do feel a lot of the modern neuroses can be better combated with some systemic changes. Where I'm like, how many people would need a therapist if we weren't so isolated from each other? Like, if you were talking to people in your neighborhood all the time, if you had a better sense of community, would you still feel as like crazy? Probably not. I feel crazy whenever I'm not connecting with people. And I think that being at home all the time, being online all the time, like, yeah, of course you feel a little bit crazy. Go hang out with someone.
Yeah.
Not to be a touch grass type, but I can't help but to wonder if the more you get involved with the people around you, the more you are working with people in your area towards a common goal, the less ostracized you're going to feel. And I know that's not something that's necessarily accessible to everyone, but I think it could solve a lot of problems. You know, if you had a local community center you could go to, how many problems would that solve? Where you don't have to get a fucking Xanax prescription.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting that you say that, especially, and this is something that I've talked about before, and I'm going to try to write about in a way. And again, because like you said, it's a very difficult thing sometimes to discuss because
Mm-hmm.
on one level, there are actual like mental illnesses that exist or that I think obviously if like you're schizophrenic, that needs to be addressed. Or if you have
Of course.
extreme trauma, you probably do need somebody to talk to. But sometimes it feels to me like it's the modern, like secular liberal, I don't know how exactly to put it, equivalent of saying, saying you need to be in therapy is kind of like saying you need to go to church. Because
Yeah.
I'm not particularly religious
It's a moral
myself.
thing, absolutely.
Yeah, well, also, I remember for a while, like, I'm in a long-term relationship, but I remember seeing like, screenshots of Twitter, like, people, mostly women saying like, if you're not in therapy, I'm not going to go on a date with you, which to me, it
Mm-hmm.
almost feels like, yeah, if you're not going to church, I'm not going to go on a date with you. But
Right.
I'm not religious now, but I grew up very religious. My dad was a pastor, and just
Mm-hmm.
seeing in a lot of ways, I feel like religious leaders served the function that therapists do, in the sense that you're taking somebody who's a trusted authority figure, you have an agreed upon set of principles and morals, and somebody who's like in your life, but also a little bit removed from it, and just seeing like
Mm-hmm.
my dad was basically a therapist half the time,
Right.
um,
What
and
denomination was he, if you don't mind me asking?
Church of Christ, which is it technically it's maybe they're not like the other girls of Christianity, because like, oh, we're
Okay.
non-denominational, we're just
Okay.
Church of Christ. But
Right.
um, but it was interesting. And I
Hmm.
do it was because I grew up very much involved in the church, and sometimes I really miss it. Like I'm not religious now, but I do miss, kind of like you said, that sense of community. And there are parts of
Hmm.
it that obviously weren't great, because you can have very people on one level are very judgmental, but on another level, like it's nice to have people who are interested in your life, even if it is like church ladies being judgmental,
Right.
because you have people
Absolutely.
who care about you, who keep up to
Hmm.
date with your life. But I don't know, I'm kind
Well,
of
but with
losing
the
my.
therapist, then you have to pay them, which I think is the
Yeah.
fucked up part, right? Because it's like it you're taking a hired hand for something that I do think that, neuroses aside, it could solve a lot of your problems potentially. And it almost feels a little bit predatory to me. And like, I don't, not as an overall practice, but just, okay,
No, I know what you
so
mean.
yeah. And I just don't think that I need to pay someone to be my friend, where it's like, if I don't need therapy in that way, why am I going to
Hmm.
outsource my friendship to someone? I'm
Well,
not going
some
to
people
pay for
do
community.
need, like you said, they don't have a community, and especially like,
Hmm.
because that's the thing with some of, like, it gets everything gets filtered through the culture wars these days. But because for example, like what I do to get my bread is I work in IT, and one of my jobs was I was the one IT guy in my state for like 40 to 50 um different offices for like,
Hmm.
therapist office, and they were all doing telehealth, and I was talking to the therapists, and they're super stressed out too. The way that
Mm.
I think what would you say, like the capital incentive is, they would go, like in some cases, like 12 appointments a day, and it's back to back to
Oh my
back
God.
telehealth. And it was like, me supporting them, like me being one person supporting 500
Hmm.
people, and they're all supporting, you know 20 to 30 people, and they'll do 10, 8 to 10 sessions a day. And it's like mental health and human connection on like an assembly line, which I
Oh
feel
my
like
God.
that's
That's
why.
so dark.
Right. I mean, well, it's also kind of like you said, not everybody has access to it, but in some
Hmm.
cases, especially during, because this was kind of at the height of COVID too, which, being
Yeah.
having to travel and doing that during COVID was a really weird, surreal experience. But maybe a story for a different time. But all that to say, I feel like a lot of people don't. Well, also, like, some people will really latch onto it, but I think a lot of people don't like it, because I feel like even if they don't see the back end like I have, you can
Hmm.
intuitively tell, like, this person, A, you're paying them, B, 30 different, they've talked to 30 other people. And I did
Hmm.
therapy for about a year, just because, and I wrote about that, where I was just burning the candle at both ends. I
Yeah.
was working myself way too hard. I had like a panic attack, nervous breakdown. It's like, okay, maybe I need to talk to somebody. And it was
Yeah.
helpful for a little while, but after that, I was talking to my therapist, like, I'm telling you the same thing multiple times, and I could tell this is
Hmm.
like an empathetic guy, but I've seen the sausage made. I know you've talked to 6 other people. Of course, you're not going to remember all of the family trauma that I told you,
Right.
because why would you? It's not like you're a friend or trusted family member.
Hmm. Absolutely. And like the friends and trusted family members, they're able to dip into that well because they know you intimately. And man, the thought of just the industrialized, like, yes, I'm spending my entire workday juggling so many different caseloads. And I can only imagine how much worse that was during COVID too, when it's like, oh yeah, we're all suffering from the same thing right now. And we're also all very encouraged to seek out therapy. So now everyone's knocking at their door. They don't have enough space to book everyone.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
not
the
so. Can I share
telehealth thing,
my BetterHelp
absolutely.
experience?
Go for it.
Oh my gosh. So this was it was when I was in college, and my girlfriend at the time had started using BetterHelp, and she was having a lot of success with it. And I was like, it's not super expensive. I'll just give it a try because, I'm surrounded by all the people that are saying everyone should go to therapy, everyone should try it. I'm like, okay, fine. So I get on BetterHelp, right? I use my podcast discount code or whatever.
Mhm.
And this woman, I start talking to her, and as we start getting into it, she is using Myers-Briggs personality types to give me advice,
Oof.
to where I give her whatever scenario, and she's like, well, as an INFP, I'm like, bitch, I'm gonna kill you. Are you serious? This is your expert opinion? Myers-Briggs
Yeah.
person. And like, don't get me wrong, I'm sure that like layman, like astrology adjacent things, like, yeah, Myers-Briggs, sure, it's a way to categorize people. But as you're supposed to be helping me, are you
Yeah.
like, and I don't know if this woman was licensed at all. I don't know if she was actually like a therapist, or maybe she was just like a certified counselor, because I know that that's something that they have
Oh yeah.
too.
That really runs the
And like,
gamut.
oh my gosh. I'm like, this is crap. And so I gave up on that pretty fast. And then I started to try and connect with another person. I was like, you know what? I don't want it that bad. I don't need it that bad. I don't want it that bad. I'm out. So fuck BetterHelp. I don't care how many podcasts tell you to use it.
I
Don't
can't
use
believe
it.
the like lowest common denominator therapy app shilled on podcast is not the. By the way, everybody, PJ's Revenge is sponsored by BetterHelp. No, I'm kidding. But
Get
no,
that
that's
money.
yeah. I wish. I would sell out for an embarrassingly low amount of money if somebody wanted to
Yeah.
sponsor me. But no, well, I mean, I think that kind of goes back to what we were talking about. It's very assembly line mental health,
Mhm.
like because me, I guess I'm an engineer, quote unquote, now. But in the tech world, like it's okay. Well, you do your basic troubleshooting steps. Like, have you
Right.
tried turning it off and on again? Like, okay, let's start with the Myers-Briggs. Well, you said the what was it, like the astrology thing, and
Mhm.
that's because, and again, that's my other hot take, that therapy, I would say it's about as effective as astrology or tarot reading, and I don't mean
Mhm.
that punitively towards astrology or tarot reading, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Because
it's just a different flavor of self-assessment. Absolutely.
yeah, well, it has, and again, it has its uses, and I think there's a reason, and maybe that's why I think, and I don't know how into it you are, but I've seen you mention it or write about it a little bit, why people are kind of in to the esoteric stuff is coming back, because
Mhm.
mainstream religion, it seems like it's on the upswing again a little bit, but a lot of people have been burned by it. But you want something that has that, like a spiritual aspect, whatever you want to say, something
Mhm.
that's not so hyper material and analytical, but you don't necessarily want to go back into the religious side, because just as a quick
Yeah.
little anecdote, I'll throw it back to you. Like my wife is very much into the whole like the resurgence of witchcraft, and I
Mhm.
was talking to her about it, and basically she just gets together with a lot of other women, and they'll talk, and they'll like do crafts and stuff, and like
Mhm.
there's like the witchcraft aspect, but at the same time, like these are just like traditional activities that women would have done with each other a generation or two ago, and it's just
Mhm.
instead of church, it's using the framing of witchcraft, and I think people are looking for a community one way or another.
Absolutely, and that's what it is, and that's one of the very appealing things about witchcraft, is that it's very crafty and very outdoors, and you celebrate seasons, and it helps you feel like in touch, just like any other religion, right? And I think too, as people become disenfranchised from organized religion, as well as, post COVID kind of being disenfranchised with like technology and everything, I think tapping into more nature-based religions is a very like, I can see the pendulum swinging. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, with all of those, it seems like if I'm seeing any common thread of what we're talking about, be it entertainment or the therapy culture, witchcraft, what have you, people are wanting to, because I feel like especially with COVID, and during the lockdown era, it was an acceleration of something, a trend that we've been seeing for like 10, 15, 20 years, depending on where you want to have the starting point, where everybody was living very much in their own head, their own constructed identity especially when you have that, I don't know if I'm using the term correctly, that false self, the simulacrum of
Hmm.
your idea of yourself that feeds in upon itself that you're always constructing, but people are just more and more logging off in one way or another. Um, and trying to find a way to live in the real world and having some sort of framing device. And maybe it can be a little bit corny, witchcraft, or whatever the male equivalent would be. But I think it's like kind of atrophied muscles that are starting to get exercised again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that phrase framing device is very on the nose, right? Because it's different flavors of the same thing. I think we're all kind of experiencing that similar, okay, taking my first tepid steps back into the world, and not, we're kind of further along at this point now that we're almost at 2025, but learning how to operate again in these new circumstances where technology is omnipresent, but we don't necessarily want it that way, and we can kind of see the effects that it's had on us. Even when I am just out in public talking to people, I feel like I can kind of smell it on people sometimes, right? Where it's like, oh, we're still like kind of socially acclimating again. Here, come on, come talk to my friends. Let's go, you know?
Hmm.
But trying to build that sense of in-person connection again is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like because at least to me, like I realize that in some ways I'm very lucky. Like Substack is kind of my only online thing that I do. And
Mm,
it's interesting to see on one level also, like you see people who are coming from different social media platforms. Um, is that you can tell, like, somebody's like a Twitter exile or a Reddit
yeah.
exile, what have you. Like, we love them, the Facebook boomers. It's as a slight
Hmm.
aside, you see like, Facebook boomer memes next to weird Zoomer, like kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Surreal type of memes.
Hmm.
But people moving more into the real life, because what I was going to say is I feel like I'm very lucky that like, um, even during COVID, like I have a small but pretty tight knit group of friends. I'm lucky enough that I'm in a long term relationship, so I feel like that keeps me grounded. And I Substack is the first time in my life, believe it or not, and I've had, I guess you could call it online friends. Like when I was online
Hmm.
in the past, it's like it's for something specific. I'm not trying to make friends that I only talk to in the digital world.
Hmm.
Um, and because I've made some friends who I've online who I've met in real life, but it was with the express purpose of, oh, I'm trying to find friends to play D&D with when I move to a
Right.
city. Um,
Hmm.
and I almost and it sounds like, because you're a little bit younger than me, so you probably talk to people who are a little bit younger than you.
Hmm.
And I'm curious if you see this trend too, or if this is just me being, again, the 30-year-old boomer and not understanding the youths, that there's
Hmm.
more of a, like it's almost like their rebellion for like, the Gen Z and like the oldest of Gen Alpha, like, what you're on the internet all the time, like, what are you, a boomer? Like they want to live in the real
Hmm.
world a lot more. Is that wrong, right?
So it's kind of hard for me to gauge, right? Because I do think that most people younger than me are still kind of like addicted to the internet, right? But you can kind of see the glaze in their eyes and that they're kind of over it.
Mhm.
So, for example, my good friend of mine who I play music with her, and she has a son who is 20, and she's like about 10 years older than me, and I'm very closer in age to her son. But so he is 20, and I'll talk to him about these things sometimes. And he, he makes music, he has a band, he's a very well-adjusted kid, and I'll sometimes ask him about, COVID and things like that. And he talks about how he'll go to a party and he'll find that people are showing up, but they're kind of struggling to interact normally sometimes. Where, like, yeah, everyone is at the party, but not everyone knows how to talk to each other. But
Mhm.
around that age, it's like, yeah, the 20-year-olds haven't had a chance to like party all through high school. They haven't really had a chance to form friend groups as much if they're doing, remote school or whatever. And I do think that having those formative years being stuck online, yeah, I think the backswing to that will be very exciting. Like, I'm waiting for all of these kids to make bands, make a band, quit staying at home, join a band, get out into the world. And I think the culture will be better for it.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
they don't give a fuck about the existing paradigms or anything. So I think they could have a lot of promise when it comes to making things that are new and interesting and aren't feeding into, yes, let's make the same type of music over and over and over, you know.
Well, especially for them. I mean, I was thinking that, for example, like when I was looking at like, these kids who are listening to Katy Perry, it's not quite as old, but like Nirvana is as old to them and like their context of growing up as the Beatles was to me when I was, 12, 13 years
Stop. That's
old.
fucked up. That's true.
Right. Well, even like, but also at the same time, because I can see you have your guitar hanging out in the background. I read that not only like there was this huge boom in sales of guitar during COVID, obviously, but like Fender published something that said that actually like more women bought guitars than men for the first time in however many years. So I'm really, and again, I don't have strong opinions on Taylor Swift. She has a couple good songs, but I think it's really cool that she's inspiring more women to play guitar. I want it to me, like, with the whole conversation of representation, whatever, it can be done in ways that are very cynical, but at least to me, the more people who are making art from the more backgrounds, the better. And like you said, I'm hoping to see some big explosion, because something I posted recently on Substack too. Like it feels like we're on the cusp of another big, I don't want to say cultural revolution because, different connotations, but cultural revolution in the context of like, well, with, less Maoist and more, like, in the 70s, like old Hollywood just kind of died out because it stopped innovating. And you had, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, they were able to create that new Hollywood. And like the late 80s, early 90s, everything just had to become kind of stale. And then like, Nirvana or NWA, however, who have you, was able to blow up and do something creative. But it feels like we're just kind of, again, right at the top of that roller coaster. And we're going to go down any moment, and we're going to have an explosion of like, all these, young kids who had to, because on one level it's kind of fucked up, right? Because I talked to people who, the early 20s who did all of their socialization in high school or early college during COVID. And it seems like it fucked them up. And maybe this is a fucked up thing to say and a little bit cynical, but it's like, ooh, we're going to get some good art out of this, because it fucked them up. So they're going to get good art.
Definitely. Well, and I don't know, I kind of have a theory about what the trajectory of that roller coaster is going to look like, because I think particularly with the rise of AI generated content, like on Spotify the other day, I was just flipping through some related artists on something I was listening to, and there was some very clear non-human elements there. I'm like, okay, that's fucked up. But anyway, I think that with things like that flowing into the online space, I think the future is offline, and I think it's going to be the new cool thing to go see someone locally, because then, oh, I know that this is a person making this, and I can listen to their music and buy their album and know that it's like a person, because there's just so much crap that's online. And I think it's increasingly going to be full of that. And it's a little bit scary, but at the same time, I think that we're overdue for a resurgence of local culture, especially after all of the venues collapsed post-COVID. I think we're going to be on the up and up soon.
Yeah. Well,
as soon as the economic situation improves a little bit and people have money to go do stuff.
Right. Well, also, like, I feel like it might just force people to be more creative as well. Because I was reading I don't know how keyed into this type of thing you are, but around like the turn of 20th century, there was that whole thing with the Clear Channel radio thing where they would kind of homogenized everything and made it so there's only a much smaller group of music that people can play on the radio.
Mm.
or the fact that I've read that it's really hard for new bands to make it and come up, because it used to be like, yeah, you play some covers, you do some shows, you work on your own material, but now like you a lot of times, and you might know this as well because it sounds like you do. You play music live. It's very common to like you need to have licensing to even play covers. So on one
Hmm.
level, it makes it really difficult for new artists to break in. But I feel like with music or movies, books, really anything, the mainstream has kind of shot itself in the foot and kind of destroyed its own credibility. And you're just going to see like people are going to have to be more creative. It's like, well, I guess we can't do covers, so we have to write our own original stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. From though from my understanding, at least this is what my guitarist tells me, it's really not that expensive to license something, just depending. Because I would like to cover the song Fever. The Cramps
Good song.
covered it, and oh my God, so good.
Mhm.
And just every version I've heard of it is awesome. And I'm like, oh, we can do a new version with a little bite. I don't know how much we'll
Mhm.
have to pay for that though. Apparently, it's not too bad. But that being said, it would only be one cover in a set of otherwise original
Mhm.
songs. So
Even
I don't
still,
know.
though, to me, it's like what you who's checking in on that? Like,
I know. I'm like, what is there going to be some exec standing in the back with his arms crossed,
mhm,
getting ready to steal the mic from me if I say words that have already been written by
right?
someone else? I don't think so. And I do think that, as a small fry local, you might not have too much to worry about as long as you're not, putting it on streaming services or anything.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, people should be writing their own original stuff anyway. Yeah, play a cover for a crowd pleasing moment, play a cover to mix up your set a little bit.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I make music to write music. I don't make it to play someone else's stuff. That's
Same.
just me.
Which is, I at least I don't know about you, and I was talking about this when one of my last podcasts I did with Sudana Krasniqi about like when I started learning how to play guitar, like I guess I don't really enjoy punk rock as a genre, but I have a very punk rock attitude. It's like,
Hmm.
I've learned, the 4 or 5 cowboy chords. I'm good to go.
Yes,
I'm not going to learn other people's songs. I'm just going to start
exactly.
writing. Well, I don't know how much of that was like me being like, I need to be creative, and just me being super ADHD. It's like, I have to learn a whole nother song. It's too much. Let
Hmm.
me just write something. But it was
No, same here. I'm
a
like,
lot of
everything
fun.
I play is in the key of C because I know the key of C very well. I know those
And
four chords
you
so
know what
good.
your voice sounds good with.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
C, it's a fun chord to play.
It is. Well, and shoot, going into learning music, right? Was very into metalcore at the time, like we talked about earlier. And so I'm immediately like, if I can't shred, then it's not even worth it, right? Like I have to be super high skill. And I think that's also maybe like the built-in inferiority complex that women in art spaces sometimes have, where it's like, I have to be the best or everyone's going to call me a poser, which
Mhm.
jury's still out as to whether or not that would actually happen. But I think that kind of killing that idea in my head by listening to a lot of folk punk really validated that for me. I'm like, okay, I
Yeah.
love this music. This guy's voice is garbage. He's playing two chords. He's screaming like it's perfect in that
Mhm.
it is so ugly that I love it.
Not unlike John
Um,
Waters.
yeah, exactly. Very much so. I think folk punk is the John Waters of music.
Great folk quote, love it. Well, I think
Yeah,
everybody has. I think if you're a creative person, you'll come up with something in your head, like, a reason why they're not going to like you for this reason, that reason.
right.
I feel like realistically, at the end of the day, people care if it connects with them. They can tap their foot to it.
Hmm.
That's what matters to people at the end of the day.
Exactly, because no one is sitting there with a chord chart to be like, that's the same format you used for the last song. Like, no one is thinking that hard about it except for you. I
Yeah,
think as soon as I realized that, that was very liberating. I'm like, oh, okay, so I can write all of my songs in C. I will be doing that. Thank you.
and that can be your style. That's the
Yeah,
important part at the end of the
exactly.
day.
It's my trademark, knowing two chords. That's my thing.
Beautiful. Well, I think, like AC/DC might have you beat, because, and again, at the end of the day, not a band that I'm into, but they wrote one
Mhm.
song in like 1971. They're like, "Yep, I'm good. This is it."
Exactly. Rinse and repeat. Just keep making it. and it worked for people. People love them. People
Yeah,
still buy their t-shirts from
yeah,
Walmart. It's crazy.
people
They're
love it.
everywhere.
So, one or two more things I wanted to get to with you on this discussion today. To shift gears ever so slightly, I feel like one of the things that was another kind of common theme that's been bubbling under the surface with everything we've been discussing is the, let's say, like, the accessibility of therapy, or the degree to which you don't see a lot of new interesting art being made because if there's a I guess you could say a capital incentive that comes with everything.
Mm,
And something that you've written about a lot, and I haven't been able to join, but I would like to at some point with your book club, talking about working class politics,
mhm,
and the influence that capital has. So I guess I'm curious. One thing that really is kind of striking me right now in kind of our current political climate, we're seeing potentially another realignment politically with, like, the Democrats
mhm,
seem like overwhelming, like the more college educated, like, PMC, professional managerial class people, and the Republicans seem to be kind of making more of a grab at the working class vote, so to speak.
mhm,
So it's something that I've been thinking, because I came much more from like blue dog Democrats, working class. Like my mom's side of the family, they were all plumbers, from like the deindustrialized Midwest. So it's something that I've been thinking about and kind of turning over in my head. Like if we don't even necessarily have to frame it with the Republican versus Democrat, but we definitely see that there is a rise of like a populist working class sensibility, both in
mhm,
music but also in politics. So, but at least for me, like, it's not the background that I came from, but trying to find a way to square that circle of somebody who, like,
mhm,
historically has not been supportive of the working class, but if they do make that change, but also like they don't share your cultural values, and
mhm.
like if somebody has to grab that working class vote, and I think the Democrats had a chance, but they kind of they shot our boy Bernie in the foot.
They dropped
So
the fucking ball, and on purpose, and that makes me so mad.
me too. So what are your thoughts on that? Maybe I was trying to have some kind of framing device, but it's maybe because it's a very confusing topic, so it's hard to give
Yeah.
a good jumping off point. What do you think?
Well, it's messy, right? Because you see like the right wing quote unquote populists where it's like they're talking about the working class in an abstract and symbolic way, but when it comes to actual like implementation of policy, I don't see them talking about unions. Like maybe I'm missing something, but I don't see them talking about actually protecting organized labor in any meaningful way. And we had Joe Biden give his little like platitudes about like, oh yes, labor good, and like that was basically it. I think
Hmm.
that both parties right now are in a place of just symbolic gesture, where I read something recently on Substack actually that made a really good case for Democrats absorbing labor and actually answering to them in a meaningful way instead of like shoving them back to the corner and being like, yeah, we'll tell you guys you're okay, but don't ask for anything.
Hmm.
Like, I don't know. And I don't really know if there's a unifying way to do that when everyone that's making all of the decisions still answers to those larger companies whose interests are against organized labor. Like they still all have the execs in their pockets and the execs don't want to protect unions. So like how are any of these people going to cater to that? And I don't think they will. My only real hope for that is that like, I don't consider myself a single issue voter by any means, but I think labor is, if you solve the issues of labor right now, I think that almost everything else that's troubling us will kind of sort out, right? I think a lot of problems can be solved that way. Um, and we can see the tide right now is turning towards higher union concentration. We're seeing a lot of strikes lately. And my hope is that that keeps building and that they start flexing their power a little bit. And then as they, um, as they present themselves as kind of a force to be reckoned with, I think at that point we'll start to see the existing parties kind of try to start placating to them. But my hope is that Labor makes their own party, because I don't fuck with any of the stuff that's going on between the Democrats and Republicans right now. I don't fuck with any of it. I would love to see the rise of a Labor Party here, because I don't think what's happening right now is sustainable in any way. I think they're both due for a collapse.
Yeah. Or at least for reformation, because I feel like if
Mhm.
you look at the history of how the U.S. has gone politically, you'll see these realignments, or in some cases, there will be third parties that form and then get absorbed because
Mhm.
that becomes the new platform, because there will be a significant enough voting block that you have to pay attention. Because on one
Mhm.
level, I see where you're coming from. I feel very cynical, and again, I come from more that blue dog Democrat, but I do have like much more like working class rural Republicans in my family who, yeah, I
Mhm.
think they're absolutely right that, the Democrats were the party of labor, but, specifically with Clinton and the neoliberal turn, they screwed him over and took him for granted. And yeah, they're right to be upset about that. And even if, the populist right don't actually do anything, they're speaking to a need that's there that the Democrats have just kind of more or less completely abandoned, other than lip service. Because I read
Mhm.
the Teamsters Union, for the first time in like 30, 40 years, something like that, hasn't endorsed a Democratic
Yeah.
presidential candidate, which I think really says a lot. And
Mhm.
say what you will, if it's cynical or not, I remember reading that J.D. Vance co-sponsored some bills with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. And even if it
No
is,
kidding.
yep, and it was like
Huh.
some stuff on like healthcare reform, and you could
Mhm.
say it's cynical, it's maybe just symbolic, but at least to me, be it somebody like J.D. Vance or the more populist side of the Democrat Party who are starting to gain a little bit more traction, I think that shows that we are moving in the right direction. Kind of like you said, we're
Mhm.
seeing more strikes and more union organization, because I think there is in that post World War II bubble where people, at least a chunk of people, got maybe a little bit too comfortable. Like the idea that like, oh, we'll just organize and we'll do debate club. Like that's not, if you probably also obviously know a lot about the history of the labor movement, but for anybody in the audience who doesn't, it wasn't like that. It wasn't debate club. People were literally getting like tortured and killed, and it
People were getting
might,
shot at the
yeah,
strikes. Like people were
it
dying.
yeah, like way in excess of anything that happened
Mhm.
in Europe. But to me, I think that's something that makes me a little bit more hopeful. Like, you have to organize independently of the party structure,
Yes.
to just become a force that can't be ignored.
Yeah, precisely that. And I don't know, you've probably heard the murmurs of this around as well, but it sounds like all of the major unions are moving towards a general strike in 2028, which is very exciting to me.
Love to see
Like,
it.
yes, let's go. We love to see it. Shut it down. Because as soon as you become a force to be reckoned with, then suddenly the talking heads will kind of realize they have to
Can't take them
actually
for
cater to
granted.
you. Yeah, exactly. And it's frustrating when, particularly the like white collar professional class is so atomized, right? And so it's really hard to figure out a way to like organize that specific group, right? But I feel like if that happens, that would be another bump for the labor
Yeah.
movement.
And again, if there's any sort of silver lining of um, COVID, and even like specifically when I see what's happening with AI, that more and more people, even in the white collar, are feeling the precarity that was always
Mhm.
there that they maybe didn't notice. Because and I guess that's I'm of two minds, right? Because on one level, it's a lot of stuff that I support as far as the democratic cultural side, but I came from more, I guess, what I don't know, you call it like white trash. Like I didn't go to college.
Mhm.
I didn't, have that suburban existence that I, see it not always, but predominantly from that white collar
Mhm.
world. But I'm sort of in a professional world because I started in telecom, IT. I was able to work my way up, so I'm kind of in a weird middle ground where I'm in this world, but not really from it. And you see a lot of
Mhm.
people, there's an interesting bifurcation of, the people who are from the more white collar side. And especially when I know I worked at startups, which is a whole nother story that I want to write
Mm.
about. And it's,
I would love to hear about that.
yeah. But all that to say, like, people felt very comfortable in these worlds, but especially in the tech world right now, what I'm seeing with AI, people are realizing, oh, wait, no, the filthy people who work with their hands, they're not the only ones who can be replaced. We can be replaced
Mhm.
too with AI. So all that to say, I feel like there's, a burgeoning class consciousness that we're starting to see even on the white collar side. And ironically enough, like, you might, if you work with your hands, you might actually be safer from AI and automation.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I think that those are the jobs that are safe. And like food service, that's safe. That has longevity. People got to eat. I don't see them making chef robots anytime in the next 10, 20 years.
Mhm.
So like get in while you can. It's fucked up though. It's really fucked up.
Yeah, from
And
what I
you
understand,
let
sorry, just
go
the
ahead.
technology is there to make a chef robot that can technically cook, but they can't get it to like smoke a pack a day and swear all the time yet. So we're not quite there.
Exactly, exactly. It until you can create a robot that can cultivate the vibe of a cash only greasy spoon restaurant, I'm not
Mhm.
interested.
But sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh, not at all. I don't remember what I was saying anyway.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I do think that the looming threat of AI too can, like you said, kind of nudge people. And class consciousness in the US has been non-existent for so long, but I do think that in the last decade or so, it's really cropped up. Because I mean, me as like a educated middle class woman, it's like, yeah, of course I fucking read Marx and whatever, but to have like laymen and just to talk to people and be like, yeah, no, this is messed up, and we are all sharing a very similar struggle. I think that as things are getting more and more dire, people will continue to connect with each other over it and realize that a lot of the
Mhm.
problems we're facing are pretty cross industrial almost, because we see the same problems cropping up in so many different industries. And they can all be fought with having good unions. Just
Mhm.
saying.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah, it makes me think. And again, the Marxist angle, whether or not you like it or not, I know some people in my audience do, some people don't. But the point being is you need to have, even some of the rhetoric you hear from somebody like JD Vance, it's not necessarily Marxist, but it's hitting some of the same points. Because I know he does
Mhm.
talk about union membership. Like most of the time, if you look at these revolutions that happen, either like, the less good aspects of it that get more violent, or just, people organizing together for more labor. These aren't people who are, reading Kierkegaard. These are like, either illiterate
Right.
peasants or people who just like, yeah, like, I work an industrial job and I don't want to be treated like shit. I
Mhm.
don't think it's almost like detrimental the more into theory that you get at a certain point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's like all you have to do is speak to people's experience. Like you don't need the theoretical background. And I started my nonfiction kind of political series recently, and I've always been really weary about writing about politics, right? Because I'm very much a layman. I don't consider myself an expert in anything. Like I read, but I'm not that deep into that world. But then it's like, but it isn't really that complicated. As long as you're like able to kind of see what's in front of you, like you don't have to
Yeah.
have a theoretical background.
You don't need to read Marx to understand the concept of fuck you, pay me.
Exactly. It's that simple. Fuck you, pay me. 4 words.
Mhm.
So I did see, to slightly pivot, I saw that you listened to the Trump and Joe Rogan interview.
Um,
I will not
like
be
a
listening, but
third of
I'm
it.
curious how that went.
I mean, it was, and again, it's kind of interesting, and that's something I kind of said in a post about it. I feel like there's, obviously, there's things that aren't great about Trump, but I think there's also like a hysterical pitch about him at times that, again,
Yeah.
to loop back to it, it's the criticisms that I see most about Trump that are most ubiquitous are not substantive about his policies, more so like he doesn't cater to like that upper middle class PMC sensibility, and I think
Orange man bad.
Orange man indeed bad. But if you were to actually, he's kind of like actually listen to him. He's just kind of like an old guy. He's kind of funny, charismatic at times. There's no denying that. But he just kind of rambles.
Old.
Yeah,
he's just
I mean,
old. And like, I'm very thankful that Biden is out. I was really hoping Trump would follow suit because it's like he's too damn old. These guys are too damn old. Like he doesn't need to be running for president. He needs to be sitting on a porch drinking
talk
scotch.
with your grandkids. Come on.
Talk to your grandkids.
He doesn't drink. But all that to say, to answer your original question, I'm not a big I haven't really listened to Joe Rogan too much in like the last, I don't know how many years. Like I used to listen to Joe Rogan between like 2012 and 2015 because I had a warehouse job. I was working 10-hour shifts, and Joe Rogan talks for 2 to 4 hours at a time. It was good background noise. It fell, and he was genuinely like he's a good interviewer. He said interesting things. I don't really follow him anymore, not necessarily for political reasons, but I did kind of get the feeling that Joe Rogan maybe was specific. I don't want to say colluding because, as the Call Her Daddy podcast, colluding with Kamala Harris. But you do see, I feel like these people have kind of thrown their hats in the ring. But my main takeaway was Trump's just kind of boring. As far as I'm concerned, Kamala Harris is, Barack Obama Part 4. There's nothing really new to be said on this. It's the vibes election, but I don't know. I couldn't even get through all of it because it was 3 hours. It's just not that interesting radio, other than the fact that I wish people would have been less hysterical about Trump and just actually listen to what he said. Because to kind of loop back a little bit, people say that Trump is like Hitler. It's like, no, that's not even remotely true. You're so far off base. He reminds me of Tsar Nicholas II. I think the second of the last Tsar right before the Russian Revolution. Because I'm to again loop back a little bit with the talk of people don't need to be reading theory to understand that you need to get paid better. Like the revolution in Russia happened right before Tsar Nicholas, who was just kind of well-meaning but incompetent. There's a very funny quote that I read. There's a book I'm reading right now called The People's Tragedy. I'm trying to think of who wrote it. But the quote is the most powerful person in Russia is the last person to talk to the Tsar. And that's kind of the impression I get with Trump. He's an old guy. He's very easy to influence, which, for better or worse, if we can get people influencing him on union politics, all the better. I'm not going to turn up my nose at it. But I guess
and that's the role Biden played.
Answer. Yeah.
He's a very helpful puppet for the people that actually run the show. Not to get too tinfoil hat about it, but that's he's a useful mouthpiece, a useful puppet.
Yeah.
Got a moldable, squishy gray mind.
Yeah.
Deteriorating.
The important part always, the president, as a front man / front woman at this point, look at who's in their cabinet. And to loop back slightly, that's what really worries me about if Kamala Harris is elected. Dick Cheney endorsed her. It's like, oh no.
So weird. And I just don't understand how we got here whenever just a couple of years ago it was okay, maybe we'll start inching towards the left, and oh no, actually it's come together time, baby. We're all the same. And I mean, they are all the same. They have all the same interests, and that just kind of seals the deal for me.
Yep, you should develop class consciousness because they sure as fuck have.
Fucked.
But I guess I'll say one more thing, and I have I know we're coming to the end of our time. My final question I always have for people, but I guess as a final comment before that, to kind of put a bow on it, it does make me think of, and again with this book that I was reading about the Russian Revolution, and the kind of, and again to tie this all together in the best way that I can, there is this phenomenon leading up to the Russian Revolution where all these bourgeois second and third sons and daughters of Russian nobles who would go out to the peasant class and teach them to read, you should read Marx and do a revolution. And once they could read, they're no, give us books on farming and adventure books, because people don't want to be lectured, but they can also intuitively understand, I think you could say, their material conditions, to use those terms, and be it like, the Russian Revolution or civil rights. Like, these are usually spontaneous things that happen because people understand their conditions and there's an inciting incident. You're not going to like theory your way into a major change. At a certain point, the trends and forces of history will just move in that direction, and there will be change one way or another. And it feels like we're definitely on the cusp of a lot of different changes. And, you hope and pray that it's going to be in the right direction.
God willing.
So, that having been said, kind of what I'm doing is my final question I always ask people who come on. Well, I guess first and foremost, as like a prerequisite to that, do you have anything that you want to promote that's coming up? Any articles, any other podcast appearances, anything you want to shout out or that you're doing soon?
Nothing really besides my newsletter that I'm continuing to work on. Like I mentioned earlier, I've got that last Gothic short story coming up on Halloween. And for paid subscribers, I've started doing a deep dive into The Power Elite by C. Wright Mills, which is a key political awakening text for me. It was written in the 50s, and it's about like the concentration of power when it comes to military, economic, and political sectors. It's a great book, and I've been writing about that for paid subs. So if you're interested in that, that is what I'm doing over at Bitch Sensei's Book Club.
Yep, that is definitely on my list of things to read. So, yep, if everybody, if you're not subscribed to Bitch Sensei's Book Club, what are you doing with your life? So, my actual last question is, I think we maybe kind of touched on it a little bit. What, if anything, is making you kind of hopeful for the future? If you don't have anything, what is something that would make you hopeful for the future?
So, a lot of things that we've kind of already talked about, right? Because the coming potential general strike, I think that just seeing the state of labor right now, even though things are kind of at a weird place, I do think that people are connecting and organizing in a way that we haven't seen in a long time. I think that's very exciting. And I do think too that just being present in my local art community is something that that keeps me going on the day-to-day, because I'm going out and I'm connecting with people who are being creative all the time. We're creating things together, and we're showing up in meet space and doing things away from screens. And I think that just in general, just being out in the world and connecting with people is oftentimes enough to make you feel like things are not as bad as they seem. Because as soon as you log on and start reading, of course things are terrible.
The doom scroll.
Yeah, exactly. But whenever you actually are existing in the world, it doesn't feel that way as much. At least if you're, comfortable enough in your day-to-day circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. On that, we'll go ahead and sign it off. Nat, I appreciate you coming on so much.
Of course. Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Anytime. I'll have to do it again sometime.
Absolutely.